Alright, how you going, YouTubers? Alright, I'm here. I'm going to be brewing possibly one of the easiest dark beers you'll ever brew. It's simple, minor ingredients, not too much. It's only a kits and bits, so it's not an all grain. There is an all grain version that I have to this, but I actually prefer this because it's so much quicker. It's genuinely about 4 ingredients. It's a Cooper's 86 Pilsner tin, a Cooper's dark malt extract, a 500 grams of dark dry malt extract, and a lager yeast. This is perfect if you live in colder climates like I do here in Canberra. I'm obviously in the depths of winter at the moment, so I wanted to brew a beer that would brew well in the cold, and that's obviously the best time to do it is to brew lagers is in winter, and Canberra is certainly no exception. So this recipe as a dark lager recipe, but then I've since realised that it's got so many levels that you can use. You can take it to, you can change the recipe up, which I'll discuss later. So yeah, the yeast I'm going to be using is S23. I was hoping originally, when I came up with this recipe, I wanted a beer that I could put on in about half an hour, and one that was going to use W34/70 lager yeast. I find that that's a cleaner yeast. I've had some negative reviews on the S23, but honestly, when I did it, that's all I could get at the time. So I threw it in, used it, not expecting much, but the results were actually fantastic. The results came out. It was really clean. It was really crisp. It didn't portray the perceived fruitiness that they say that this lager yeast can let off as an ester or a phenol. I didn't really get any of that at all in the beers that I've done, and I haven't changed the yeast when I'm doing this version. So yeah, this beer, it started as a dark lager. That was my intention. I love my dark beers, but for me, lagers are a little plain and boring. So I thought I'd try a dark lager. I came up with this recipe. It worked really well, and yeah, so I'm going to brew that for you today. Okay, so here we are with my dark lager, effectively. So what we're using is the 1.5 kilo Cooper's dark malt extract. We need 1 tin of the 86 days Cooper's Pilsner. That's 1.8 kilo in net weight. Normally I use 500 grams of the dry malt dark extract, but today I'm going for a kilo just to bump the specific gravity up a little bit, give me a little more ABV. And again, I have gone with the Lager S23, which is a dry lager yeast. So there you go. I've taken the lid off the 86 Pilsner, taken the yeast out. I don't tend to use the yeast much or ever. The only time I'll use these, I've got a massive stash of these. The only time I'll use these is when I'm doing an all grain brew, about 10 minutes from the end of boil. I'll throw 2 packets of these into the boil, and that effectively acts as a yeast nutrient. So if you want to save money on yeast nutrients, just use your old Cooper's yeast, throw them in, and then they basically become a nutrient for the yeast. All right, so now I'm just going to put these in the hot water. That'll allow that to soften. It'll also allow me to peel the label off. Now I think that is, if you don't peel the label off and you've had no problems with that, that's great. I tend to have problems. I have basically used the opener, and I've taken like a layer of layer of this label with me, and unfortunately that has gone into the beer as well, so I've had to pull that out. It hasn't had any adverse effects, but now I just make sure I always remove the labels. Okay, so I've got the fermenter here. It's got the sanitized, it's all sanitized. I've just tipped it out into there. I've got my bucket ready to add my water, use for my water, and then yeah, I'll be back in just a moment. The time now is 2:22, and I'll show you how easy this beer is to actually brew, and yeah, we'll go from there. Thank you. Okay, so I've tipped the malt extract and the dry extract into there. I've added a bit of boiling water just to break that up a little bit. Now I'm gonna just tip in half a can of boiling water into these, and then just use my stirrer, which I sanitized. Stir it around. These don't take long, you just sort of run the water up and down the sides, get as much of that extract off as you like. It doesn't matter if you don't get it all off, it's not going to make any difference really. A few extra milli points. Okay, so here we go, we're inside, tipping this in. That'll just add a little bit more hot water as well. Just keep that lid on there. Okay, so now I'm going to just give that spoon 2 more minutes, then I'm going to start filling the container with the hot water, or cold water, sorry, just to get it up. I want to start this at about 18 degrees, so I'm going to try and get that as close to 18 degrees as I possibly can. So we've been going for 11 minutes. Now I'm just going to stir that up as best as I can. Apologies for the cameramanship. It's quite difficult to do this when you're one-handed. I can feel the lumps now on the base are starting to break up. Got an amazing aroma. You can smell the roastiness of that, those malts, the dark malt and the dry. It smells very, very nice. Okay, so I'm going to put that back in there. Put that lid back on. Planning on taking this to 21 litres. Where is it? There it is there. So that's that mark there is your 23, so I'm going to bring it to about there, which is 21. Now obviously this is going to go into a keg, so 19 litres. Just going to 21 litres gives you a bit more alcohol. So it increases your ABV of your beer, but it also allows you just a bit of grace on the trub at the bottom that'll settle out during attenuation and during the fermentation process. So if you are wanting to put a beer into a keg and you brew 19 litres, chances are you're going to run a little short. You're probably only going to run 17, 18 litres. So by brewing an extra 2 litres, I'm accounting for that attenuation that happens during the fermentation process, and that'll allow me to basically get to that that 19 litres for my keg. All right, I'll fill this up and I'll check back in once I'm all filled. Okay, so we're at 21 litres there. Beer's looking good. I'm just going to now basically whisk it using my spoon. I'm going to stir it up. Just give it a real vigorous stir. I usually like to get right in there and whip it almost. You can see how tanned that head is, and that is exactly what it starts to look like when you pull a beer out of from the keg, and once it's all carbonated, it gets that real dark, roasty, tanned head. All right, so I'm going to keep doing this for a few minutes, and I'll come back. Okay, so that's all done. I'm just going to sprinkle the yeast in now. Alright, so that's all done. Yeast is on, or in, I should say. Put the lid back on. Put my, there you go. So there she is, the world's easiest beer, and it's taken 23 minutes. I'll tell you what, you're not going to do much better than that. You're never going to be able to achieve that in all grain. And like I said, I do have a version of this for all grain. But yeah, I just find that this beer, whilst it is, to the purists, it's not the most perfect version, but for what you need, for a home brewer, just wanting a quick, easy, dark lager, with a multitude of abilities to be able to tweak the recipe and make it your own and change it into different styles even. I'll explain that in a second. This is a fantastic base recipe, and that's all I use it as. It's a base recipe. If I want to keep it as a lager, I will, but if I want to change it, then I'll do that as well. And I'll explain, as I said, I'll explain ways of doing that. Here we go. A 22-minute dark lager at this stage. Alright, so I've got the fermentation is sitting now at 17.2. I've got that set to 12. The ideal temperature for S23 lager yeast is 12 degrees, and they recommend, that's what I've always brewed it at since doing this recipe, and I've never had a problem like those phenols that I was telling you about before, those fruity flavors. So inside here, here's the fermenter here. I've just strapped on, using large masking tape, the thermostat that runs into my temperature controller here. It's just one you get from Keg King. The cold is, that's where the fridge runs into, and then the heat belt runs in at the back as the heat source. So I'll just put that in there. I'll do it a bit neater in a minute. This is another beer that I have going at the moment. That's in the keg, ready to go, waiting for one of these other ones next door to pop. So this one here is a porter, not too dissimilar to this, but it's an actual porter brewed with ale yeast and a slight dry hop. So this is it here. The belt is on. It's not touching there, which is good. Just keep that beer nice and cold. I'll just push it up a little bit further. I find working using the larger masking tape works really well, because it enables a little bit of resistance to the outside cold. So whatever the temperature, ambient temperature in the fridge sits at, there's a little bit of protection, so that the probe is actually reading more accurately the liquid inside the fermenter, not so much the outside temperature, which you can get variances through there. I use a bung. I don't have a tap because I like to auto siphon. And yeah, so that's it in the fridge, in the fermentation chamber, ready to go. Currently it's sitting at 17.4. I mean, that'll slowly drop over the next 12 to 24 hours down to about 12 degrees. I've set it in increments so it drops slowly, and it doesn't have a rapid crash, which is I think it's also pretty relevant for this style of lager yeast. And yeah, that's it. I'll later on tonight I'll pour another beer. I'll pour a beer that I've got this same style on tap. I'll pour it, give you a look at it, and then I'll tell you some variations that you can do with this beer, and what sort of lagers yeast you can change, or ingredients or adjuncts and all that sort of stuff, just to change the style of beer and to change the beer completely. So yeah, that's it there. There she is, ready to go. Brilliant.